why me in the beginning was totally negative, because every time I'd get angry, I'd look up and go, why me, you know? Why pick on the little guy, you know? And now that my life has done a 360.
After 30 years locked away in silence, a mysterious vault tied to one of the most dazzling icons in the entertainment industry was finally unsealed. And what emerged left everyone frozen in shock. Hidden behind layers of dust and secrecy, the forgotten chamber held more than just a record. It carried explosive fragments of a private life.
And I was so nervous, I had to have something to do with my hands. And within a 10-year period, I went from, hey, what's happening, baby, to mincing and dicing.
Sammy Davis Jr. never revealed. Rumors of scandal, shadows of Hollywood's golden age, and shocking truths long buried were suddenly exposed, rewriting everything we thought we knew. What exactly was found in Sammy Davis Jr. vault? Every vault has a story, but this one begins long before the lock was ever turned. To understand what waited in the dark, we first have to look at the man who built his life under the brightest lights, the legend behind the vault. Before most kids even learned their ABCs, Sammy Davis Jr. was already performing for crowds. Born in 1925, he grew up on the road with his father and his uncle as part of the Will Maston Trio. Show business wasn't something he stumbled into, it was the air he breathed. By the time he was a teenager, Sammy had stage presence that many seasoned entertainers could only dream of. What made Sammy stand out wasn't just one gift, it was everything. He could sing with silky smoothness, dance with a firecracker's energy, deliver comedy routines with sharp timing, and slip into uncanny impressions that left audiences laughing in disbelief. He even proved himself on the big screen. With such a wide range, it's no surprise he earned the nickname that followed him for life, Mr. Show Business. By the early 1950s, Broadway was starting to catch on to what nightclub audiences already knew. In 1956, his show, Mr. Wonderful, turned him into a Broadway sensation. Hollywood soon followed, giving him roles that showcased not just his voice and dancing, but also his charisma as an actor. Still, it was his connection to a legendary group of entertainers, the Rat Pack, that would cement his place in American culture. In 1941, when Sammy was still a teenager performing with the Will Maston Trio, he crossed paths with Sinatra during a shared booking. Sinatra took notice of the young performer, and over the years, that chance encounter grew into one of the most important friendships of Sammy's life. By the late 50s, Sammy had become an official part of Sinatra's inner circle, the Rat Pack. Alongside Sinatra and Dean Martin, he was part of a trio that redefined entertainment in Las Vegas. But behind the glamour were real battles. At the Sands Hotel, Sammy could wow sold-out crowds night after night, but because of his race, he wasn't allowed to stay there as a guest. Sinatra wasn't having it. He reportedly told hotel management flat out, "If a casino resort would not let Sammy in, we're not coming in." That Sinatra's influence wasn't merely talk, it literally forced real change. And when it was nightfall, Vegas belonged to the Rat Pack. They'd spend the day shooting Ocean's 11, and by midnight, they were back under the lights, turning the Copa Room into something nobody had ever seen before. Frank would come out first, calm and in charge. Dean followed, drink in hand, singing with that easy charm that made it feel like he wasn't even trying. And when it was Sammy's turn to hit the stage, he didn't only sing or dance, he moved like no one else did. One moment, he was making the crowd laugh. The next, he was dancing in a way nobody else could. He kept the energy high, and the audience loved every second of it. Crowds didn't just watch the Rat Pack perform, they became part of the show. Every night felt like history being made, even if the crowd didn't know it yet. Sammy's career wasn't limited to the stage or screen, though. In 1972, he recorded The Candy Man, a single that became his signature hit. It soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for weeks. For people who had never seen him in person, the song brought Sammy's voice into homes, radios, and record players across America. It wasn't his most complex work, but it showed his ability to spread pure joy through music. But Sammy's story was never just about the spotlight. He came up during an era when black entertainers faced open discrimination in the very venues they headlined. They could sing for packed houses in Vegas, but were forced to use the back door when they left. They couldn't stay in the hotels they performed in, and they couldn't even sit in the audience as guests. Sammy knew that humiliation all too well. As his fame grew, so did his courage to push back. He refused gigs at segregated clubs and joined other entertainers and activists in demanding change. Slowly, Las Vegas opened up. By the late 1960s, black stars and black guests could finally enjoy the Strip without being pushed aside. Sammy's voice, presence, and friendships had helped drive that transformation. But it wasn't only in casinos or backstage deals where he left his mark. What made Sammy Davis Jr. unforgettable wasn't just his extraordinary talent, but his resilience. Audiences saw the smile, the tap shoes, the rapid-fire jokes. But behind all that was a man who practiced relentlessly, who fought quietly but fiercely for respect, and who turned pain into art. Every performance was confidence, joy, and defiance rolled into one. For every standing ovation Sammy Davis Jr. received, there was a storm brewing somewhere in the background. And when those storms hit, they revealed sides of his life that many people never saw coming. Controversies brewing. Sammy Davis Jr. may have been adored by millions, but fame never shielded him from controversy. In fact, his career often moved in rhythm with the very storms that swirled around him. Some of those storms were sparked by the times he lived in, while others came from choices he made on his own. To understand the weight of his life, we have to look at the moments where applause gave way to outrage, and where every headline seemed to pull his name in a different direction. One of the earliest and loudest controversies centered on his marriage to Swedish actress May Britt in 1960. At that time, interracial marriage was still illegal in many states and deeply frowned upon in much of America. When Sammy Davis Jr. first crossed paths with Swedish actress May Britt in 1959, it felt different from anything he had ever experienced. May wasn't caught up in the racial boundaries that defined America at the time. She was a young actress from Stockholm, still building her career, and she carried herself with an openness that made her stand out in Hollywood. To her, love was love, and she didn't see why skin color should dictate who a person could be with. The world, however, didn't see it that way. When the two announced their engagement in 1960, it made headlines across the country, and not for the reasons you might expect. Almost overnight, May's studio contract disappeared. Hollywood made it clear that her choice to marry a black man would cost her a career. They had originally planned to exchange vows in a synagogue, but hate got in the way. The Temple Israel of Hollywood began receiving hostile calls, with people warning there would be trouble if the ceremony moved forward. The trustees grew nervous, and Rabbi Nussbaum stepped back, leaving his assistant, Rabbi William Kramer, to officiate. Rabbi Kramer admired Sammy, and he agreed to move forward when others wouldn't. On November 13, 1960, under a canopy of flowers at Sammy's home in the Hollywood Hills, they finally said their vows. Security was tight, guests were on edge, but the couple pressed on. Frank Sinatra stood proudly as best man, and Peter Lawford added his name to the marriage certificate. It was a wedding wrapped in both celebration and fear. After the wedding, the backlash was swift and brutal. In one instance, while Sammy was performing in London, the audience greeted him with jeers and fascist chants. In America, the hate became even more personal. Their mailbox was filled with venomous letters. Neo-Nazis picketed his shows in Washington, D.C., and threats of bombs followed him from city to city. By then, Sammy understood the danger he lived with. He rarely left the house without protection and made sure May was surrounded by security. To the public, their marriage was controversial and often criticized, drawing more attention than admiration. In reality, May spent much of her life during those years trapped in what she later described as a kind of gilded cage. Her days were shaped by caution and restraint. Every public appearance carried tension, and even at home, the constant threat of hate and judgment hung over them. While Sammy navigated fame and controversy with energy and defiance, May's world felt smaller, confined by the social pressures and dangers surrounding their marriage. The relationship also carried heavy political consequences. In 1960, before his marriage to May Britt, when John F. Kennedy launched his run for the White House, Sammy Davis was out there, lending his voice, his time, and using his star power to campaign for Kennedy. Alongside Frank Sinatra and the rest of the Rat Pack, Sammy showed up at rallies, performed at fundraisers, and stood proudly as one of Kennedy's most recognizable celebrity supporters. It was a big deal because America was seeing black entertainers step into political spaces in ways that hadn't been done before. However, something unexpected happened that was almost like a betrayal. Sammy's relationship with May Britt was front-page news, and Kennedy's team, worried about how an interracial marriage might play in key states, started getting nervous. Because of this, they sent a message to Sammy. The message didn't come directly from Kennedy, but through Frank Sinatra, who acted as the middleman. The request was that Sammy should postpone his wedding until after Election Day. Sammy agreed, held off on marrying the woman he loved, and kept doing his part for the campaign. But when November passed and Kennedy won, things didn't play out the way Sammy expected. Sinatra had promised him a spot at the glamorous inaugural gala, the kind of stage where Sammy's talent and charm could shine for the whole nation. However, instead of reward of standing with the man he campaigned for, the invitation never came. The explanation was that politics wasn't ready for a black entertainer to show up with his white wife on one of the most high-profile nights in America. For Sammy, it hurt deeply. He had campaigned hard, delayed his personal happiness for the sake of political optics, and still ended up on the outside looking in. What should have been a moment of pride showed that no matter how high he climbed, the color of his skin and the woman he chose to love could still close doors in his face. Well, despite the constant backlash, their marriage lasted nearly 8 years. May had converted to Judaism before their wedding, a move that felt natural given Sammy's devotion to his faith. She had already given up her film career when her contract was canceled, and after their marriage, she stepped completely out of the spotlight. Their home life was more private than people imagined. Later, May would share that Sammy was a deeply involved father. He wanted his children to know his faith and heritage. Their son Mark was raised with Jewish traditions, and Sammy made sure all of his children understood their cultural roots. Over time, the world shifted. Laws began to change, and slowly, hearts began to open too. Unfortunately, by 1968, the marriage came to an end. The reasons were not as public as the struggles they had faced together. Some even talked about infidelity, others about the weight of their differences. Whatever the case, they chose to go their separate ways. May eventually returned to a quieter life, focusing on her career. She made occasional appearances on television, but never fully stepped back into the Hollywood scene. Together, they raised their daughter Tracy and 2 adopted sons, who carried with them both the blessings and burdens of their parents' very public history. But the storm around Sammy didn't end with his marriage. because religion soon became another lightning rod for him: Judaism. After the horrific 1954 car crash that cost him his left eye, Sammy found himself searching for something deeper to hold on to. Speaking of the car accident, on November 19, 1954, Sammy Davis Jr. was driving his new Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles when disaster struck. Near San Bernardino, another car backed into his lane, and Sammy's face struck the car's horn during the accident. The impact seriously injured his nose and left eye. At just 29, doctors said the eye could not be saved and had to be removed. During recovery, Frank Sinatra welcomed him into his Palm Springs home, ensuring he wasn't alone. Weeks later, Sammy returned to performing, first wearing an eye patch on the cover of his debut LP and then later replacing it with a glass eye. During his recovery process in the San Bernardino hospital, Sammy met a Jewish chaplain and asked him many questions about how he survived the accident he had. That conversation ignited his curiosity that grew into something far deeper. He began studying Judaism, and what he discovered struck him on a personal level. Sammy often said he saw his own life reflected in Jewish history: the resilience, the survival against impossible odds, and the determination to hold on to identity no matter the obstacles. By the time he married May Britt in 1960, Sammy had formally converted. He studied the faith, observed its customs, and spoke openly about how Judaism gave him strength in a world that often tried to tear him down. But little did he know he was about to face further criticism. Only this time, it wasn't from the whites, it was but his own brothers. Some African American leaders whispered that he had abandoned his roots, while skeptics, inside and outside the Jewish community, claimed the conversion was a ploy for attention. On stage and in the press, jokes were hurled at him about being both black and Jewish. At one roast, Milton Berle even mocked his marriage and religion in a Yiddish parody. Another comedian sneered that in Alabama, people wouldn't know what to burn on their lawns if Sammy showed up. It was cruel and ugly. But Sammy didn't back down. Even then, people kept talking, and his beliefs made his image more complicated and sometimes controversial. Also, politics added more fire to the fuel. We all know that Sammy Davis had always admired John F. Kennedy and supported the Democratic Party during the 1960s. Yet, in the 1970s, he shocked fans and critics alike when he openly aligned himself with President Richard Nixon. At a time when Nixon was deeply unpopular with many in the black community, Sammy's embrace of him seemed like betrayal. The moment that defined this controversy came in 1972 when Sammy was photographed hugging Nixon at the Republican National Convention. The image made headlines everywhere and was replayed in newspapers and television reports. For many who had seen Sammy as a trailblazer for black rights, the hug felt like a contradiction. Some accused him of being a sellout, while others claimed he was trying to influence change from within. Regardless of his intentions, that single moment created a wound between him and many of his fans, one that never fully healed. Even within the Rat Pack, Sammy faced controversy. While he was loved by Sinatra and Martin, some audiences never accepted him fully. Racist jokes were a common part of the group's act, and while they often came from friends on stage, they played into stereotypes that many later criticized. At the time, audiences laughed. Now, looking back, those moments seem more complicated. Was Sammy reclaiming space by taking the joke and standing strong? Or was he using the jokes to take control? Or were the people he called family quietly letting him take the hits while they stayed protected? That tension was always there, and it added another layer to the questions people asked about his role in the group. There were also controversies that touched his personal character. Sammy Davis Jr. lived fast, threw wild parties, and mixed in Hollywood circles that made gossip columnists eager to chase his every move. Rumors about affairs and indulgence filled magazines, whether true or exaggerated, and they kept his name in the public eye in ways that weren't always flattering. While many stars faced the same, Sammy's visibility made his controversies bigger and harder to escape. It's strange how someone can seem larger than life while they're here. Yet when the curtain finally falls, what's left often says the most. A legend is gone. On May 16, 1990, the world lost Sammy Davis Jr. as a result of a long battle with throat cancer. He was 64 years old when he passed away at his Beverly Hills home. The illness had been public for months, and the sudden absence of the man who had commanded stages from Vegas to Broadway left an emptiness that nothing could fill. The cancer had first been discovered months earlier, when doctors found a tumor pressing against his vocal cords. Immediately, radiation and treatments followed, leaving Sammy tired and visibly scarred from the fight. At times, the therapy caused his skin to blister and burned away the energy he had always carried so naturally. By early 1990, doctors confirmed the disease had returned. His final months were spent moving between hospitals and his home, with close friends and family keeping him company. For the public, it was a sobering sight. The man known for unstoppable energy now showed how illness could strip away even the strongest performers. Now, after the funeral, what came next revealed another battle that had nothing to do with cancer. As his will was read and his estate examined, a difficult truth surfaced. Sammy had been generous to a fault and open-handed with friends, but he had also taken risks with his money. Failed investments, backfired tax strategies, and by the time his documents were opened, his finances were in disarray. Reports suggested that he owned about $2 million in personal property and another $2 million in real estate. It sounded respectable until the full list of debts was placed beside it. The numbers did not match, and the scale of what he owed quickly became public. The headlines were striking. Sammy Davis Jr. literally owed more than $5 million in back taxes to the federal government. On top of that, mortgages and personal bills pushed the total debt even higher. Some reports said the figure reached closer to $6 million once penalties and interest were added. With the gap between assets and debts so wide, his estate was placed under immediate pressure. Courts ordered sales and auctions, forcing a lifetime of belongings to be appraised, boxed up, and sold off. For fans and friends, watching his possessions go to the highest bidder felt more like another loss than a financial correction. Death usually closes the book on a life story, but in this case, people thought they knew everything about Sammy Davis Jr. until the day his vault was opened. What was found inside added a new twist to his story that left many frozen. The vault. In 1991, the IRS took items from a storage unit, and what they found was shocking. The Burbank unit looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, it revealed a lot about the life of the man who rented it. The space had been paid for in cash and placed under a false name, which was already suspicious. When they opened it, what they found wasn't gold or money, but pieces of Sammy Davis Jr.'s world. A trumpet that still carried the marks of countless performances, an old record player, a jukebox that still had records inside, and photographs tucked between sleeves. Among those records was the song everyone knew him for in his later years, the family favorite, The Candyman. While it felt like an unauthorized unveiling, it was in fact a legal move. The government was looking for items they could possibly use to pay off the heavy tax debts his estate had left behind. What struck people first was not the legal side of it, but how intimate those items felt. These weren't posters or props meant to impress anyone. They were everyday items that had been used, touched, and clearly cared for. The trumpet had a worn mouthpiece from countless late-night performances. The jukebox, despite its front being faded and records still tucked inside, felt like a little time capsule from mid-century America. To fans and historians, that storage locker was like a private glimpse into his life, including a mix of professional triumphs and personal moments, showing the human side behind the legend. The discovery lingered in people's minds because of years of speculation. For years, there have been rumors of secret boxes or hidden treasures he might have left behind. In reality, the truth was simpler and somehow heavier. The locker had been rented in October, only weeks after a court had ordered the sale of many of his belongings. The first payment for it was in cash. That detail made investigators wonder whether some items had been quietly hidden away, out of reach from creditors. Renting the space under another name only fueled those suspicions. What was once a private collection now became part of a public case, showing how quickly personal belongings can become part of financial and legal battles. Beyond the questions of payment and ownership, some of the items held real historical value. Some artifacts belonging to the Rat Pack were not only for keeping sake, they were pieces of a time that helped define Las Vegas and left a mark on American entertainment. For fans, finding those items was a mix of sadness and awe. Seeing his personal things turned into auction lots made it feel like losing him all over again. His instruments, watches, costumes, and photos were suddenly just numbers and prices. For family and friends, it was painful, like pieces of him were slipping away. For collectors, it was a rare chance to own a real piece of entertainment history. Depending on who you were, it felt either like a loss or a way to keep his memory alive. The financial side couldn't be ignored either. Just like we said, this search wasn't happening out of nowhere. Sammy's estate was drowning under millions of dollars in federal tax liens. The IRS saw the locker's contents as a way to recover some of the money owed. But instead of people talking about his music, his movies, or even his legacy, the focus shifted to debts, sales, and government claims. Even if the items didn't fully cover what he owed, they still told a story about the life behind the legend. It shows the world that fame doesn't guarantee financial security. They gave fans and the media a new reason to look deeper at the man behind the spotlight. Behind the public spectacle, there were quieter, harder struggles. His widow, Altaviz, was left to untangle years of debt and paperwork while grieving. How did Altaviz come into the picture? Let's rewind. Not long after his marriage to May Britt ended, Sammy Davis found himself back on the stage. Sammy's life had always been tangled with the stage, so it's almost poetic that he met the woman who would become his lifelong partner in that very setting. It was 1968, and Sammy was starring in the Broadway musical Golden Boy. Altaviz Gore, a young dancer, had joined the cast, playing his sister in the show. And this is exactly how the spark flew. At first, it was nothing more than the easy friendship of two performers sharing long rehearsal hours and the unpredictable rhythm of theater life. But with each passing show, their bond grew stronger. Altaviz wasn't dazzled by the Rat Pack fame or the Hollywood spotlight. She saw the man behind it, the one who had fought through barriers his entire life. About 2 years later, on May 11, 1970, Sammy and Altaviz stood together and exchanged vows. Their marriage lasted nearly 20 years, right up until Sammy's death in 1990. Through it all, Altaviz was by his side, not only in the beautiful moments on stage and in Hollywood circles, but also in the darker hours. Now, back to what we were saying. When Sammy died in 1990, he left behind not just a legacy of performance, but a mountain of debt. Because she had filed taxes jointly with him, she was now responsible for some of the liabilities herself. The stress lasted for years as she tried to hold on to what little remained. Despite her own grief, she had to step into a legal minefield and find a way forward. The estate was under siege. His Beverly Hills mansion went up for sale. Jewelry, memorabilia, and personal items all had to be cataloged and auctioned to satisfy creditors. For someone who had just lost her husband, it must have felt like losing him again through every sale item. Yet, Altaviz didn't back away. Instead, she took charge. She oversaw the cleanup by managing everything the paperwork stated, court hearings and public scrutiny all at once. It wasn't easy. On top of the grief and the legal chaos, she struggled personally and later spoke openly about battling alcoholism. Despite that, she saw the fight through. By 1997, she reached a settlement with the IRS, easing the lasting pressure on the estate. Over the years that followed, she did more than just manage debts. She set out to reclaim Sammy's legacy, helping organize shows like Mr. Bojangles, the ultimate entertainer, to remind the world of who he was, not just what he owed. The question many asked was how a man who had commanded some of the highest paychecks in show business could end up here. The answer was layered. He lived big, often spending freely on friends, family, and luxuries. He invested in ventures that failed to deliver returns. He also relied on aggressive tax shelters that were later challenged by the government. Once those were disallowed, the back taxes piled up quickly. The combination of generosity, risky investments, and lifestyle spending eventually caught up to him. Success on stage does not guarantee peace off stage, and even legends leave behind complicated legacies filled with both triumphs and the debts that weighed them down. But then, if Sammy's vault held such personal treasures, how many more secrets could still be hidden away that the world may never see? Tell us what your thoughts are in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss any of our uploads. To enjoy more content like this, click on the next video on your screen.